Is Audric Estime the number one waiver wire ad this week? Coop, Estime leads the backfield in Denver. This is a rookie that we've been waiting on for a long time. Led Notre Dame in touchdowns and yardage last year, and he has the single season school record for touchdown runs in a season. They've been playing football at Notre Dame for a long time.
Yeah, and no question, he's the top ad. You only get so many chances to catch lightning in the bottle. And I think people want guarantees, but that is so rare. It's so rare for the true, like, handcuff situation where a guy goes down and this guy's the starter the rest of the way and the team is good and he's also good, but he just didn't play. It's like, that is such a rare occurrence, and everybody's going to be so in on that you have to take a shot on these situations. And there's so many settled backfields out there, pretty much all of them, that you're just not going to get another case where a backup is going to actually emerge on a team that can do some damage. This is one of the few times, and we saw Jaleel McLaughlin started, Javonte Williams played the pass snaps to start the game. Estime got a pretty much full workload with the second drive, and he ran with it. And they might just go full hot hand here, man. So you got to take a shot. I mean, it's worked once this year on Tyrone Tracy, where we said, go out, try to catch lightning in a bottle. We've tried it in other situations. Tank Bigsby didn't really pan out. Bucky Irving, mixed results. But you have to give yourself this shot, especially if you don't have somebody, or if you have somebody like Kareem Hunt or Chuba Hubbard and you're worried that at the worst time the rug is going to get pulled on you, you have to go for these situations. So regardless of what you think about this player, put that aside because it no longer matters. What matters is what Sean Payton and his hot hand committee approach. If he wants to go with this guy rest of the way, who are we to argue? This is a guy, a coach in Sean Payton, that at one time had Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson and traded away Adrian Peterson so that he could use his third round rookie Alvin Kamara to tremendous results. Like, this guy traded away the quarterback. He fired the kicker. He traded away Jerry Jeudy. This guy is willing to do his own thing, and who are we to argue? So you got to give yourself a chance with Audric Estime, 100%.
Yeah, I love what you said. I think that a great comparison for Estime is he's very similar to Braylon Allen. He's a younger back with size, juice, college production, and he can handle a big workload. So I think that he's actually a huge addition because, like you said, the playoffs are right around the corner. You don't know when this sort of takeover might happen. We've seen how successful the Tyrone Tracy waiver wire ads were. I think we could see it again with this one. And Sean Payton has been a coach that's gotten a great deal of production out of the running back position. Who are a couple other running backs, Coop, if people are trying to maybe save some fab, not go all in on a potential committee? Who are some guys, maybe some contingent upside plays? Talk to me about Cam Akers first.
So Cam Akers absolutely is somebody you got to keep an eye on. I always break my waiver article into three. I have the main one, which is for guys that we think have short-term and long-term value, which is where a guy like Audric Estime is going to live. Then I do a streamers article for kind of just 1 week or so type guys. And then I do a stashes article for guys you might not be able to start right now, but they're either handcuffs or guys whose role could grow. So for me, if you need somebody this week, Cam Akers has got to be on the radar because Aaron Jones left this game briefly. He did come back, but he left the game with a rib injury. And you know how it goes with sometimes with these guys. They get all hopped up on the adrenaline. They play. Turns out after the fact that they did a bunch of damage to cartilage, did some damage to their ribs, and the team wants to hold them out for at least a game, maybe two, just so they can get fully healthy because this is a team making a push for the playoffs, right? So there is a world where maybe Aaron Jones does miss time. Either way, Cam Akers is ahead of Ty Chandler. So if you're looking for the handcuff there, he's that guy. If you need somebody to start, that's maybe a little more boring, but we know he's going to get some work. Hard to argue that Gus Edwards isn't going to be involved moving forward. Comes back, gets 10 carries in his first game. You know what they want to do. You know who Gus Edwards is, though. So don't expect him to come out and just take over and be that guy. He's a 238-pound bulldozer that sometimes gets the ball on 3rd and 1, and sometimes that 3rd and 1 is at the goal line, Theo. So that's the name you got to look at. And then after that, it's a lot of stashes. If you're looking for somebody that could carve out a role on their own without injury, got to mention Khalil Herbert. He didn't get added in as many leagues as we thought. He only got 2 snaps, so he could hit the wire. This is a guy that we've seen Zach Moss hit a high level. With Chase Brown, they were both splitting. Before Zach Moss got hurt, he played 278 snaps, and Moss didn't, and Chase Brown didn't even crack 200. So, I mean, we've seen their willingness to use 2 backs. So it's something to think about. And the rest of the stashes haven't changed from what we've been looking at, Theo. Blake Corum, because if Kyron Williams goes down, you got the big snap share. Trey Benson, because if James Conner goes down, you got that great schedule with the Patriots, Panthers, Rams. It's the Braylon Allens, it's the Keaton Mitchells, it's the Ray Davises. It's a lot of those same names if you're stashing.
Especially in shallow leagues, keep an eye on which players are getting cut, because some of these high-end handcuffs that people have been like holding, and there's been a lack of injuries. Those are the kind of guys that might become available to you.
Like Audric Estime?
Estime is a guy who's going to go for a ton of fab. Love what you had to say about Cam Akers. And I will say that Aaron Jones has sort of been dodging bullets. We saw him get injured over in the London game. We thought he was going to miss time then, and he played through it. Last year, he only played 12 games, and Minnesota has been winning a ton this year. So, Minnesota's in good shape. I think it would kind of be in their best interest that if Aaron Jones is banged up, to give him a week off. And I think Akers, due to the quality of that offense, would be like a top 18 play at the running back position this week if he were to have the backfield onto his own. So very interesting week at the running back position. A lot of contingent upside, guys. Quarterback position, we're going to continue talking about the two young guys. Drake May, still widely available in a lot of leagues. Bo Nix, the next 2 weeks are very, very good for Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a guy who had a lot of success, obviously not against the Chiefs this weekend, but these next 2 weeks are perfect streaming territory for him. Russell Wilson, really, really playing strong. Pittsburgh, Coop, that's a Super Bowl sleeper right now, the way that they came out. They beat Washington. And then a few others. Jameis Winston, obviously in Superflex leagues. Anybody else that you're interested in, and your thoughts on sort of the young guys, Winston, et cetera. Oh, and got to get your opinion on Trey Lance in case we see that in Dallas. Hopefully we see that in Dallas.
Yeah, and the thing with the Trey Lance debate, and especially if you're plugged in with social media, you're going to have to disconnect yourself from the quote-unquote real-life football arguments, because this is fantasy football, where not even just rushing ability, but the willingness to run is king. We saw it this week with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones played terrible. He threw 2 interceptions. He threw no touchdown passes. What did he do? He was willing to run. And then they ran for a touchdown, and the day was saved, right? These guys, and Daniel Jones isn't even athletic. He runs a 4.8. He's not fast. All these guys are faster than him. Drake May, Trey Lance, especially. Trey Lance, willing to run the ball, 13% of his dropbacks. Not this year, but over the small sample size we have. This guy is willing to scoot. So if he's going to be the guy, you have to have him on your radar for those super flex leagues, for those deep leagues. And if they commit to him as a starter, now we're talking about, in those deeper 12, 14 team, 16 team leagues, single QB, he's on the radar. Beyond that, we do got to mention Daniel Jones has an incredible schedule. I was just looking at it a moment ago. It's for passing. How does this sound to you? He's got down the stretch, New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, Indy. Zoom out further. They've got the bye week next week. After the bye, this is the rest of the season for Daniel Jones. Tampa Bay, Dallas, New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, Indy. There is not one difficult pass defense on there. And then, Will Levis. If Will Levis is going to hold down the job, that schedule goes. Washington's a little bit better now, but his playoff schedule is Jacksonville the week before, Cincinnati, Indy, Jacksonville again. So if you're really struggling, especially in these super flexes or even just in general, you plan to mix and match down the stretch. These guys, for Will Levis and Daniel Jones, their schedule is so good that if your quarterback is somebody you don't really trust and he has 1 or 2 really bad matchups in there, these guys don't have any bad matchups. So you can just sneak them in there and hope it gets you by.
Yeah, and I'll say for Superflex managers, one more really deep name to consider is Desmond Ridder. If he takes over, I know that's one it's kind of an ugly one, but depending on how deep your league is, sometimes starting quarterbacks just don't become available. So the Trey Lance one is interesting because I think you could say that Dallas, they're really struggling to pass the ball. I think you'll see design runs with Trey Lance. And like Coop said, that's what we need in terms of fantasy upside, really a fantasy floor, if anything. Think about the weeks that Malik Willis gave you earlier in the year. That could be something similar. And Coop, there's a lack of running backs that can take pressure off. So you could see even more design quarterback runs with Lance. Ritter is a guy with just enough two-way ability that he interests me. But at the end of the day, I mean, for me, the biggest takeaway is that Drake May is just so widely available still, despite flashing so much fantasy upside, where if my back is against the wall and I need a spot start, I love your Daniel Jones call, but Drake May offers you a lot of the similar upside. So Drake May, to me, I don't know why people are so reluctant to add him, but he is widely available in like Yahoo leagues right now. So that would be my number one. Would that be your number one quarterback ad as well, Coop?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just, again, this guy, he came out of the concussion. We were worried that he was going to shy it away. 8 for 95. This week he was willing to run once again. So I have no problem. May is definitely the top guy there. We're trying to make sure there's a name out there for everybody. And I'll make faces all I want when you talk about Desmond Ridder, but there's absolutely leagues I'm in. You and I are both in the Scott Fishbowl. Every one of those guys has to be rostered. Mac Jones has started this week. I started Cooper rushing him. Like, sometimes you got to get crazy.
Yeah, and Coop is right. Like, talking about like being a week ahead, talking about just planning. We have 4 teams on a bye this week. Week 12 is the really difficult one with 6 teams on a bye. Yeah. And then we have another 6-week bye in week 14. So we really want to stress to be a week ahead. We're not going to go through every single team here, but take a look at your players on bye, especially for, got to plan for week 11, but do yourself a favor and look and see what your lineup looks like in week 12. It might make sense for you to make a move or two that can really cover you. Like if I spend fab and I add a guy whose team goes on a bye in week 12, that doesn't necessarily help me as much. I might get stuck scrambling and cut that guy if I don't plan out my roster as well. So wide receiver, Coop, this is like an incredibly deep one. I'd say the player that I'm most interested in is Adonai Mitchell, because I think Adonai Mitchell has the juice. We finally saw him break out. This is the Reggie Wayne talks about Adonai Mitchell. All of the the fantasy football metrics people love to talk about how good he was at separating. So for me, I think Mitchell's got a clear path, and he's widely available. Obviously, Alec Pierce is as well. Both of those guys benefit from having Joe Flacco behind center and from having Michael Pittman be banged up. Ricky Pearsall is obviously a kind of a no-brainer ad, even with Juwan Jennings getting this elite usage. In the first quarter, we saw Ricky Pearsall house one on a long touchdown and get a target in the end zone. Obviously, a first-round pick getting that sort of usage should be something you want to add to your roster, especially considering that it was coming out of a bye week. Rashad Bateman, 8 targets last week, had a touchdown, 6 catches. Bateman has been playing well, and Deontay Johnson, an absolute non-factor. Wow. Xavier Legette, obviously he's limited by his team, and Carolina does have the upcoming bye. But Xavier Legette is a guy that I think we can both call a wide receiver 4 for the rest of the season based on his role and the lack of target competition around him. Quentin Johnston, Coop, this is one where, again, the metrics people hate him, but he scored another touchdown. So there's a lot of names this week. But for me, Adonai Mitchell, that's the one that I'm most excited about, and probably Ricky Pearsall, number 2. Who would be your wide receivers that you're most excited about? And then maybe any names that I didn't mention that you're into.
Yeah, for me, I mean, that's the thing is that it's pretty, the landscape offers a lot of good dart throws and potential upside guys down the stretch. I just want to remind people that, like, in our minds, Amon-Ra St. Brown as a rookie was this guy that was just, a crazy breakout, and then it was amazing. But the reality of that player is that he didn't do anything until week 12? His role didn't change until week 11. He really didn't pop until 12 or 13, right? Like same year, Hunter Renfrow down the stretch was a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy, believe it or not, ended up being a top 10 wide receiver on the season based on what he did down the stretch. So we're looking for these guys that either are younger guys that are just coming into their own or that are getting a new opportunity. And I think the difference maker for me among a lot of these players is you have to ask yourself, what does your team look like and what do you need? You mentioned we got 4 bye weeks this week, 6 the next week. After that's Thanksgiving and everybody plays, then it's another 6 after that. Why don't you look and see what kind of buzzsaw you're going to run into? If you have bye week problems this week, well, you can't be adding Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker. They're not going to help you, right? Because they're not going to play this week. They're on bye week. Same with the Giants, if you're thinking about guys like that. So you really have to think about what it is you need. If your team is loaded up and you have no problems with the bye weeks and you have everybody good to go, that's when you really should lean into guys like Adonai Mitchell, guys like Ricky Pearsall, which the underrated thing about Ricky Pearsall is that he already has a role, but now he's one injury away from that big role, right? Like now he is Juwan Jennings, and we saw what Juwan Jennings did earlier this year when Deebo Samuel was out. Came out, had 3 touchdowns. We saw what Cade Otton has done. Cade Otton was a guy that was, in an okay role. Then the wide receivers got hurt. Boom shakalaka. Now he's crushing. We saw what Dallas Goedert did against the Saints. When the A.J. Brown and those guys were hurt. You also have to consider it's like talent plus opportunity. So guys like that, if you're just loaded up, look for guys like Adonai Mitchell or Pearsall that could shoot the moon. If you need somebody to start for you right now, I'm looking at a guy like potentially that. I guess you mentioned a ton of them, but maybe one you didn't mention is Noah Brown.
Yeah.
Right. Where he doesn't have his bye week till week 14. He now has that role. This is 3 weeks in a row that he's been the wide receiver 2 for that team. He had 81% snap share the week he caught the Hail Mary. Last week he came out, got 6 targets. This week he came out, got 6 targets. He had a very, very, very bad drop at the end zone, in the back of the end zone. Not sure if you saw that one, but
I did see that one.
That
was no good.
It was no good.
A little side note. I'm a red zone guy, and then I will watch the games that I need to watch. The condensed version.
Me too. Yeah.
So I love Game Pass and all that sort of stuff. But my father has been a long time Washington Redskins, Washington Football Club, and now Washington Commanders fan. So I get like the constant texts about that game. And he's like, "Did you see this? Do you see this?"
Yeah.
So I heard all about that, and I did get a chance to see it. So nothing with Washington ever goes unturned there. Coop, you broke it down very, very well. And I'll say I think that like Bateman's available in enough leagues that I want to sort of bet on Bateman for the rest of the season. I love what you talked about with sort of like the contingent upside and all this kind of stuff. But like last year, you saw Isaiah Likely in the second half of the year. Maybe it's a different Baltimore Raven. Maybe it's actually Bateman this year who plays well over the second half of the year. I know Harbaugh's been waiting on him for years and years and years, and it just felt right to see him score that touchdown in that high-scoring game. So I'm into Bateman, but there's a lot of names this week. I think that I want to also add guys with ceilings. I think sometimes we chase floors way too often this time of year, but when you get to like the playoffs and like ride or die, win or lose fantasy football, I don't want to have a guy in my lineup that's like, I'm going to get 10 points and be like, okay, he did what he was supposed to do. Adonai Mitchell gives you that juice where he might give you 6 points and fail, or he could give you a 20-pointer because he takes one to the house and helps you win the week. So that's where I'm at.
You don't want to be out there begging Nick Westbrook-Akine to catch a touchdown just to barely get you to 8 or 9 points, right?
Yeah, and the unknown upside too, like Nick Westbrook-Akine, the Marquez Valdes-Scantlings, like we know who those guys are. That's never going to be exciting for you. But Coop, we got to talk about the contingent upside at the tight end position because we have a couple of injuries we want to keep an eye on. Dalton Kincaid and also Sam Laporta. Now we don't have a complete picture of how banged up these guys are, but why don't you talk to everybody about your expectations for maybe a Dawson Knox in a spot start? Fantastic matchup for tight ends this week with Buffalo. And also Brock Wright's a guy where earlier in the year, we thought that we were going to discuss some Brock Wright when it was Sam Laporta banged up the first time. He played through it. Now we might actually see him for a game. So your thoughts on those two guys?
Yeah, I always watch the games as well. And I have to admit, the first game I had to go back and watch was the Texans-Lions game this morning because I fell asleep. So I had to watch the second, a little bit over the second half of that game. The very next game I watched, Bills game. And I wanted to see what happened with Dalton Kincaid. He basically came out, had a great first quarter. Then he clearly tweaked his knee. Second quarter, he played 2 snaps, done. Went into the locker room, came out at halftime, played 1 snap, and then did not come back up. So clearly they were trying to work his way through the knee thing, and they said, not worth it. When you see that, it usually means that he's going to probably miss a game here, and then he gets caught in that bye-apocalypse, right? So, I mean, just knowing that they have the bye the week after, I think we probably do have at least 1 game without Kincaid, but like Dawson Knox, if you're going to start him, you basically have 1 week this week. So it's got to be dire straits for you. Maybe if Kincaid is your tight end, I think that would be the main situation where I add Knox. If I have Kincaid and nobody else, I'll just say, okay, you know what? I'm starting Kincaid if he plays. And if he doesn't play, I'll start Knox. That's probably a world to live in. I'm not necessarily giving up on Hunter Henry yet. I mean, he ran a ton of routes, played a ton of snaps. 1 down game after a bunch of good ones. I think he can bounce back. You know, again, Sam Laporta, it's an AC joint injury. That is typically a contact injury. I think it might have been on the touchdown when he hit the ground, but so, you know, it gets exacerbated by contact. I don't know if you've ever seen Keenan Allen's shoulder, but his shoulder is permanently disgusting based on those. Dalvin Cook, year after year after year, AC joints, you know, they can be tough. So
the body armor era where Dalvin Cook had to wear like it looked like a Game of Thrones type thing. So
you know how he initially hurt that shoulder? It wasn't in a game. He finished a workout and then fell up the stairs. I swear to God, he fell up the stairs and put his arm out and jammed up his shoulder, and then he re-injured his shoulder for like 6 straight years, dude. Crazy how that happened.
The falling up the stairs, that's an underrated thing, though, because you're falling and you end up hitting something on your upper body. When you fall down the stairs, you can kind of brace yourself a little bit. So, nobody making fun of that for our guy, Dalvin Cook.
Be careful out there on leg day.
Okay? Both ways, up and down the stairs.
Up and down the stairs.
When you got the jiggly legs.
Yes.
Coop, we've got to talk about these young tight ends too, like Jatavian Sanders, Theo Johnson. Both of these guys are still widely available, and both of these guys are really flashing.
Yeah, and those are two guys actually that work out perfect for what you talked about with the Bipocalypse, honestly, because that week you've got Evan Engram on bye. You've got Dalton Kincaid on bye. This is week, which one? It's week 12, right? It's Evan Engram. Yeah, it's bad. It's Evan Engram, Mike Gesicki, if you've been trusting him, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, a lot of tight ends on bye. It just so happens to turn out that JT Sanders faces one of the best matchups for tight ends as Carolina gets the Chiefs, who have been very leaky for the tight end. And Theo Johnson in that same week gets Tampa Bay, which has been also an excellent matchup for tight ends. So, again, if you want the safe play, it's Theo Johnson because he's been doing it when everyone's healthy. If you want the upside play, it's JT Sanders, who has looked better, but they insist on using Tommy Tremble when he's healthy. I do not understand it, Theo. It's time to give up. It's time to move on and let this young kid do his thing, because every time he's played, he's either had 5, 6, 7 targets, catching a lot of them, or this past week he scored the touchdown and also got tackled just short of another touchdown. So, I think it's time for them to move on. I'm hoping they do. But yeah, those are kind of the plays there. And I guess on the very, very deep front, if you're playing, again, deep FFPC or leagues where everybody's rostered, time to start thinking about who, if the starter gets hurt or some wide receivers get hurt, who could really pop, right? So think about K-Dot. We mentioned K-Dot and then Dallas Goedert. When the wide receivers are hurt, they do a lot more. A guy like Jonnu Smith, maybe, right? If you can drop somebody from your bench right now, if he's out in the wire, you can throw him onto a roster. He plays Monday night. Or you look at guys like Elijah Higgins, who got the full pass catching role. He didn't do much with it, but if something happens to Trey McBride, they're thin over it. Brenton Strange, we already saw Brenton Strange look good when Evan Engram went down. I mean, with Mac Jones, he got some targets as is, right? Think about what happens if Zach Ertz goes down. Ben Sennett maybe gets a shot here, dude. There's a lot of spots like that where if the top guy goes down, I mean, there's not a lot of them we love, because usually guys can carve out a role if they're doing anything at all. But if the starter goes down, you could see something. Same thing with an Isaiah Likely, right? If I know he's hurt right now, but if Mark Andrews goes down, we get the same thing again. So keep that in mind. Just always be thinking, if this guy gets hurt, who benefits, right?
And I'll throw out Will Dissly as well,
Yes.
Another guy where this is one where we didn't ever think we'd really be discussing Will Dissly, but LA's playing better offensively. And Will Dissly is getting a 30% target share this past week. This is a guy where all the metrics are saying to add Will Dissly. If this was your boy Stone Smart and he would have done what Will Dissly's doing usage-wise, Coop, we'd be going crazy. So I think we have to consider adding Will Dissly for the floor. It's we've been it's weeks of chasing the Tyler Conklins of the world. Dissly's sort of what you want right there in that sort of situation. A floor play tight end to get you through a week.
Well, if Will Dissly was a former quarterback turned wide receiver turned tight end whose parents are both basketball players and he had a cool name like Stone Smart, then we'd be on board. Unfortunately, he's a guy that's made his way through, and shout out to him for being a warrior, through an ACL, a torn patellar tendon, which is a death sentence, and also through a broken leg that Pete Carroll described as one he had never seen before. It's he's been through a lot, but hey, we can't argue with the targets. The craziest thing, I believe Nathan Yankee over at PFF shouted this out. He pointed out that if you just look at targets per route run, right, which of course adjust for volume, but Will Dissly hasn't run a ton of routes. The team doesn't throw a ton. But in terms of the routes he runs, has the second highest target per route run of any tight end behind only Evan Engram, which is absolutely bonkers. If this team were to actually for once get into a shootout, you can expect Will Dissly to not just get 5 or 6 targets, potentially get 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever the sky the limit is. They usually don't get into shootouts because they don't turn the ball over, but it's entirely possible. So a guy like that, if you need, he's getting the targets. So if you need someone to play for you right now, Might have to go there.
Well, I'll tell you what, crystal ball future, Jim Harbaugh is going to draft your guy Loveland from Michigan, the best tight end in this draft.
Let's
and
go.
If that sort of usage for Loveland, I mean, I think we'd be all pretty excited about that one. Coop, this was a lot of fun. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah. Find me on Twitter at Coop A Fiasco. I'm on SiriusXM about 3 times a week. I tweet out that schedule. And the Fantasy Alarm YouTube channel is where my stuff lives. The article's over at fantasyalarm.com. What about you, buddy?
Yeah, so at the OG Fantasy for Twitter, and you can find my stuff at PlayerProfiler, Fantasy Points, all my podcasts over at one of those 2 channels. Find me here every single week with my guy Coop. And you can find my article in The Athletic at the end of the week. We're grinding, Coop. We're grinding. We're in the streets.
Dude, we have precious little football left, man. I just want to squeeze every bit of it. I see people on the Twitter sphere, they're like, I'm quitting, I'm done. I'm like, dude, I'm the opposite. I'm like, dude, we got to cherish every bit of football. You don't know how bleak it's about to get. We're going to have to watch baseball, Theo. No,
thank you. We'll see you back here next week. Let's crush it this week, everyone.